Welcome to episode 18, the Proper Gentlemen's Club. And, wow, it looks a little bit different, huh? Episode 18, Proper Gentlemen's Club. We're actually going to double the audio for the podcast and the YouTube channel. Same. So, if you want to watch the video's on the YouTube. If you don't want to watch this video and you just want to listen while you're driving, hit Spotify up, Proper Gentlemen's Club. This will be both. Sometimes, sometimes I do it different. And also, again, please go ahead and give a like and a subscribe. This information is going to be a little bit different than really what I had anticipated for this channel. It's some important information. Obviously, as you saw in the title, we're going to go into a little bit of research that I did on the art per se of manifesting and why that is what that is. Okay. How do I put this? I went into a rabbit hole yesterday and we're just going to get right into it. I've got 12 pages of research that I did yesterday. If you guys are familiar with Neville Goddard, if not, let me restart. This episode is for those people who are familiar with the law of attraction, are familiar with manifesting, are familiar with the subconscious mind, are familiar with biology of the brain, and have a background in spirituality. If you don't have a background in spirituality, this can still be useful to you. What I intend to do here is give you information on why this isn't just a spiritual magic thing. And my hope is that that does not take away the power in the law. I want to make this real for you and help you to understand how this works, not just spiritually, but mentally and physically, how this works. And how this works, what I mean is the art, the absolute art of visualization and assumption. And this blog will be up soon. I've got to edit a few things on this, so this will probably be up by tomorrow on the blog. Again, thepropergentlemansclub.com. So feel free to go over there and get the transcript. I'm not going to use the transcript from the podcast or the YouTube channel. I'm going to actually write it out for you. I just have some editing to do, and then we'll be done with that. So if you're still here, again, go ahead and give a like and a subscribe, or just a subscribe, or just a like, or even a comment. Bear with me as I go through this. I'm going to try to make it not so long. We're at 3.5 minutes already of the explanation of my intent for this content today, who it's for, and the purpose of this, what this purpose is for. And obviously the title is The Art of Visualization of an Assumption, but this is really the how this works, and not just the spiritual how. This is the biology of how this works. And again, I pulled information from science, I pulled information from spirituality. This is, for me, my belief, the metaphysics and the quantum mechanics of how this works. I am no doctor, I am no scientist, but I pulled information from doctors and scientists and spiritual leaders, and I put them together in a way that I hope can help you. And with all that being said, let's dive into it. So, let's go into the Niels Bohr experiment first. Okay? And some of this is paraphrased. Disclaimer, some of this is paraphrased from articles that I found online. Some of these are quotes from doctors and scientists that I found online. Some of this I pulled directly from articles online, and you'll be able to get those article links in the blog. So if you want those links, you'll have to hit the blog up tomorrow, Friday. I'm going to work on it when I get home so I can release it for tomorrow morning. So if you need the links for these articles, they'll be in the blog tomorrow. So you have to go to the site and go ahead and save this video again with a like or a subscribe. Let's go. We're going. Okay. So consciousness is literally the only reality. Our senses can only show us what our consciousness has accepted as truth. Okay? Our senses can only show us what our consciousness has accepted as truth. Neville Goddard. The power of your assumption, when persisted in, becomes your reality. Let me say that one more time. The power of your assumption, when persisted in, becomes your reality. Okay? Niels Bohr, particle wave experiment. During the 1920s and 1930s, I believe this is from the article New Theory of Consciousness, physicists discovered what had been called the wave-particle duality, a fundamental concept of quantum mechanics which proposes that elementary particles, such as photons and electrons, possess the properties of both particles and waves. And if we know anything about biology, we know that photons and electrons are both part of the atom, and they rotate around the nucleus of the atom. Photons being at +1, electrons being at -1. This is how they keep in rotation. What's even stranger is that the particle and wave aspects cannot be separated, whether they complement each other. And again, one more time, photons and electrons possess the properties of both particles and waves. Niels Bohr called it the principle of complementarity. He saw this complementarity as the inevitable result of the interaction between a phenomenon and the apparatus used to measure it. Basically what happened is they took it's the double slit experiment. And if you know anything about this experiment, what they did was they wanted to see if these things could exist in more than one place at a single time. And here's the deal. And this is my conclusion on this. If photons and electrons are both in our minds as a part of the atoms, which make up the molecules, which come together to form the tissues, and wow, we came from nothing to something. Okay. Photons and electrons possess the properties of both particles and waves. So they can be matter and they can be energy, vibrations, waves. They did the double slit experiment, and what they wanted to see was if this photon and electron can be more than one place at once. When it wasn't observed, it went through as a wave. And when it was observed, it was only observable in one spot. What this meant to me is that when we're looking out, we can see where we're at. We observe these things. We observe light as solid objects. Our mind, however, is capable of much more. Our mind can be in more than one place at once, right? If you close your mind, if you close your eyes, not only can you be standing in one place, but you can be on a beach somewhere, or top of the Eiffel Tower, or wherever you can imagine yourself to be, okay? That's what the mind is capable of. Dr. Thomas Verney said in an article that we know that the mind can influence the state of the physical world. We know that the intentions, emotions, and desires of an experimenter may influence experimental outcomes, even in controlled and blinded experimental designs. Being in two states at once is not an unknown phenomenon in human psychology. The mind complements matter, just as the particle aspect of matter complements its wave aspect. Consciousness can interface with the material world because matter and energy are interchangeable. Wow. So matter and energy are interchangeable. Can you see matter? Yes. Can you see energy? I'll leave that up to you. And a lot of this information I'm going to leave up to you to decide what to do with it. I'm just presenting information in a way that I found it. The inside of an atom is mostly empty. Protons, neutrons, and electrons are considered subatomic particles, and they each play a crucial role in the structure and behavior of atoms. Just a quick refresher, protons are positively charged particles that are found in the nucleus of an atom. They have a charge of +1, and we're not going to talk about the mass. That doesn't matter right now. Neutrons are neutral particles, meaning they have no charge. Very interesting. And electrons are negatively charged particles with a charge of -1. And we could go into neutrons a little bit more, but we're not going to do that. The interactions inside of an atom. So, quick thing, and we'll get into this later. The brain produces an electromagnetic field. Don't know if you knew this, but we'll also dig into that a little bit later. I'm keeping an eye on the time because I just want to get this information out. And if you have questions, put it in the comments and we'll get to it. If you have other questions, go to the blog, we'll get to it. And if you're listening on the podcast and you want the video, I hope I will be doing illustrations of some of these. So if you want more information, just go see the video on the YouTube channel, The Proper Gentleman's Club. Electromagnetic force inside of an atom. Atoms make up molecules, molecules make up the tissues, and et cetera, inside the brain. So your brain creates an electromagnetic field. So positively charged protons in the nucleus attract the negatively charged electrons, keeping them in orbit around the nucleus. This attraction is due to electromagnetic force. Protons and neutrons are held together in the nucleus by the strong nuclear force, which is much stronger than the electromagnetic force, but acts over a very short range. This is how, so this force overcomes the repulsive force between the positively charged electrons. I believe this is how matter is created. Somebody can correct me, if not, whatever. But you wonder how we don't just dissolve like they did in Avengers and turn into dust and fly away. Well, there's a force holding us together, and this force overcomes the electromagnetic force and the repulsive force between the protons, the positively charged protons, and the negatively charged electrons. If you're still with me, great, fantastic, I love you. If you're not, stay with me. This is going to make more sense here in a second. Still love you. So, electron shells. Electrons occupy specific energy levels or shells around the nucleus. This arrangement of the electrons determines the chemical properties. And we'll talk about chemicals here in a second, because chemicals are also coming into play here in this electromagnetic force and how the brain gives information, etc. Okay, so stability. The balance between the electromagnetic force, the attraction between protons and electrons, right? This is how the brain creates the field. And the strong nuclear force, which is holding the protons and neutrons together, keeping this thing from just dissolving into nothingness, determines the stability of an atom. If the forces are balanced, the atom is stable. If not, the atom may undergo radioactive decay to reach a more stable state. Talked about state and assumptions. Assuming a state mentally. Are you okay? So, as we move forward, atoms in the brain. We just talked about the structure of an atom, right? So atoms in the brain. The brain is composed of various types of atoms, primarily carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen. And this is atoms that are all around us. You're breathing these atoms in. These atoms are in every single structure that's in our known universe. All right. Interesting, huh? We're all made of the same stuff. Some stuff you can't see, some stuff you can see. All right, so we're getting somewhere. These atoms form the molecules that make up the cells and tissues of the brain. Now, I've been beating this into you for the first 13 minutes of this video. These atoms that are made up of these things that create electromagnetic and nuclear forces, the nuclear force holding together, the electromagnetic force is due to the positive charge and the negative charge swirling around in the atom, which make up the molecules, which make up the cells and tissues of the brain, which are made of primarily carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen, and the same stuff that we're breathing and the same stuff that when you're looking at the screen, you can see me and you can see everything else in here. All right. The brain consists of billions of neurons, which are nerve cells, and glial cells. Neurons are responsible for transmitting information through electrical and chemical signals. What did we just say? The nuclear force, the arrangement of electrons in these shells determines the chemical properties of an element. The electrons, which rotate around the nucleus, the protons. Chemical. Neurons are responsible for transmitting information through electrical and chemical signals, which glial cells provide support and protection. I'm not worried about the glial cells right now, but the neurons transmit through electrical and chemical signals. We have an electromagnetic force surrounding our brain, which we'll get into what that looks like later, and you're going to be surprised at what that looks like, because I'm going to show you a picture as well. Arrangement is matter. So, atoms combine to form molecules, which in turn form the cellular structures of neurons and glial cells that organize into complex networks, which makes up the brain's gray and white matter. You've seen all these pictures of the universe and the space in between. You've seen these things. Okay. I'm going to try not to go, I'm going to try to skip over some of this other stuff, but bear with me. So arrangement as energy. So there's arrangement as matter and there's arrangement as energy. And what do we say? Matter and energy are interchangeable on the subatomic level. So atoms combine to form molecules, which in turn form the cellular structures of neurons and glial cells, neurotransmitters. Molecules like neurotransmitters, molecules which are made up of atoms, can be chemically charged, right? So dopamine and serotonin are crucial for communication between neurons. Again, dopamine and serotonin, which are molecules like neurotransmitters, the dopamine and serotonin, are crucial for communication between neurons. These molecules are made up of atoms arranged in specific structures that allow them to bind to receptors and transmit signals. So arrangement as energy. This is energy now. Neurons communicate through electrochemical signals. When a neuron fires, it generates an electrical impulse that travels along its axon. This electrical activity is a form of energy generated by the movement of ions, which are charged atoms, across the neuron's membrane. Ignore some of this stuff if it doesn't make sense. I'm just going into how the brain works and functions from nothingness into something. We talked about the nothingness that's inside of an atom, and now we're talking about how it comes together to make up the brain and how it transmits electrical and chemical signals in the mind, and it's also surrounded by an electromagnetic field due to the structure and the makeup of these atoms and molecules. Synaptic transmission. At the synapse, which is the junction between two neurons, the electrical signal triggers the release of neurotransmitters. These chemical messengers cross the synaptic gap and bind to receptors. We just talked about what these are, and that was matter, and so this is the energy part. And then the brain's electromagnetic field, and this is the arrangement of energy in the brain compared to the arrangement as matter that we talked about. And if you need to rewind this, please do, go ahead. The collective electrical activity of neurons generates electromagnetic fields. Again, the collective electrical activity of neurons, which the brain is made up of billions of these, generates electromagnetic fields. These fields can be measured using techniques like electroencephalography, and magnetoencephalography, providing insights into brain activity and function. So, electromagnetic field, EEG and MEG. So these things can be measured. This is a real thing that can be measured around your brain right now. My brain is surrounded by an electromagnetic field as my neurons are firing these electro and chemical signals that we just described come from these atoms, which are made up of positively charged photons and negatively charged electrons, which orbit around the neutron, which is there's no charge, which come together to form the molecules and tissues that make up the brain. So this is all happening right now, inside of you as well. So the integration of matter and energy. The brain's ability to function relies on the seamless integration of matter, atoms and molecules, and energy, which are the electrical and chemical signals. Dopamine, serotonin, we talked about these, neurotransmitters, which can be affected by your food, your sleep, your time on the phone, what you're watching, your attention span, etc., etc. The things that you're addicted to. If you're on dopamine, so we talked about all this stuff is available online. Okay. The intricate interplay allows for the complex processes underlying thought, perception, emotion, and consciousness. And I'll say that one more time. This intricate interplay allows for the complex processes underlying thought, perception, emotion, and consciousness. So, understanding how atoms are arranged and function in the brain helps us appreciate the complexity of the mind and remarkable capabilities of this organ. So, the brain's ability to function relies on the seamless integration of matter and energy. Matter and energy are also interchangeable. We talked about that earlier. Okay. Here's where we get into the interesting part. So, your brain, your sensory input. So we got the 5 senses, your sight, your smell, hearing, taste, and sense of feel. Okay, and we're not even talking about the third eye stuff right now. We're not even talking about the pineal gland, which does the circadian rhythm. It's in charge of circadian rhythm. So for those of you who can get up at the same time every day without using an alarm clock, programming yourself that way, this is what the pineal gland does. So when your pineal gland is clean and clear, you can program yourself to do certain things. Your senses take in approximately 11 million bits of information per second. Just look this up. This includes data from our eyes, ears, skin, and other sensory organs. And so I did the math. This equates to around 1.3 megabytes per second of information that your senses are taking in that you are not going to be aware of. It's 4.7 gigs per hour of information that we're vastly unaware of. Conscious processing, though, is a little bit different. So out of that vast amount of data, 4.7 gigs per hour that you're unaware of, the conscious mind can only process about 50 to 120 bits per second. So the vast majority of information that we take in is actually processed subconsciously. You getting where I'm getting at here? So we go from matter and energy, everything in the brain, the electromagnetic field, and how much the brain is taking in. So the same article that I talked about with Thomas Verney, is it that article or was it another article? There's another article. So with this information, you'll have to understand that a couple years ago, when I was looking at this, I decided on my own that the mind is a black hole. And there's many implications to that. Because this information has to go somewhere. It has to be processed somewhere. Okay? And the electromagnetic field, I believe, is connected to our minds in another dimension. Bear with me. I know a lot of you just checked out. But here's the deal. If you can't see it, and there are 6 senses, right? So the ether, the energy, the unseen energy that's all around us. Why is there, so there's fields around the human body that can't be seen. This would mean that there's another dimension that we can't see with our physical eyes. So another dimension, they've made it sound crazy in the movies, but it's not crazy. It's just an unseen field, okay? A dimension is an unseen field. So let's rewire how we think about dimensions. Dimensions are an unseen field, okay? So the subconscious mind handles the bulk of this sensory data, processing it at a rate that is estimated to be around 27,500 times faster than that of the conscious mind. So now we can perform all these tasks without being overwhelmed by the sheer amount of information that our subconscious mind is processing for us. And it is subconscious mind, because we've got conscious mind and we've got subconscious mind. And we're not talking about the brain here. So what are we talking about? It's an unseen field, just like the electromagnetic field around my brain is unseen. It's in an unseen field, which is connected to something. The mind has to be there, right? That's my take. That's my take. Don't take me to court on this. Hopefully this is still making sense. If you're liking this, you know what to do. So, the mind can occupy 2 states at once. The conscious mind, so here's where it gets interesting. And I'll pause on the stuff. So quantum superposition. Stay with me. This is easy. In quantum mechanics, superposition refers to a particle's ability to exist in multiple states. And we already talked about a particle and a wave are the same thing. A superposition refers to a particle's ability to exist in multiple states simultaneously until it's observed or measured. Me looking out is observing and measuring when I'm not inside of my mind. When I'm consciously looking out here, I can see what is. But the mind can be somewhere else. The mind can be in another state. And we talked about states and how they decay already. When the inside of that atom starts to break down, due to various charges, due to various changes in the atom structure, it decays into a more stable state. This is how you can assume a state, and when you persist in it, it must change. We already talked about how the mind and the consciousness can interact with matter. We talked about this scientifically, how it interacts with matter. So, what I'm saying is, if the conscious mind is only capable of processing very small bits of information, but the subconscious processes it more, it is our job to program our subconscious mind and control it consciously by controlling it consciously with that seed, with those thoughts, you control these thoughts in your mind, you can then change and assume the state, vibration, waves, which are changing all of the quantum particles, atoms that are around you in an unseen dimension. This is how energy and matter, like we said, are interchangeable. So at some point, this thing that's processing almost 5 gigabytes of information every hour has to be doing something if you're consciously directing it. If you're not consciously directing it, you are allowing your environment to create what's going on instead of you creating what's going on in your environment. There's all types of, I'm not going to get into the philosophical and spiritual stuff right now. I'm going to ignore that, but that will go into the article. So if you want more information, propergentlemansclub.com will have the blog, and I'll have all the dirty stuff in there that you can read and all the links to the articles. Okay. This is how we never attract what we want. We attract what we are, because the state that your mind is in is, again, if this thing is processing all of this information at a rate that our minds can't keep up with, that our brains can't keep up with, then whatever you're consciously thinking about, that's why it's so important what you're looking at on social media. If you're even on social media, you better be watching what you're looking at, because all of that is consciously programming the subconscious to create the circumstances that are going on around you. So we talked about how the brain generates its own electromagnetic field, which I believe is relaying information to the mind. This is how thoughts and emotions and feelings come into play. The brain is generating its electromagnetic field, which communicates to the mind. This is my take. When neurons fire, they create tiny electrical currents, which in turn generate magnetic fields. This interplay forms the basis of the brain's electromagnetic activity. So, as we move forward, they've done some studies which they think they've shown how the brain can communicate and is linked to consciousness. We talked about the pineal gland a little bit. The pineal gland's ability to produce melatonin and regulate circadian rhythms. But the pineal gland is also sensitive to electromagnetic fields, which could interact with the quantum fields. The quantum fields are just the fields that we can't see. Let's just put it that way. So another interesting thing, and this is the last interesting thing, because I'm going to start cutting this off now. And this is made to be listened to over and over again for the information. I'm explaining the physical, mental, and spiritual links between the brain, the mind, and the art of visualization and assumption. And the reason I haven't said a lot about assumption and visualization is because I'm literally telling you how this works. I'm literally telling you how the brain works, how it communicates with the unseen field, and how your brain is constantly sending information to your mind, which is communicating with your subconscious mind, which is processing information at a rate that you don't understand. And so by consciously controlling what you're thinking about, what you're saying to yourself, those thoughts that you're saying to yourself, all those things, you can reprogram and assume a different. This is why it's not just about reprogramming, it's about assuming a state. So you assume that you are the person that you desire to be, instead of trying to, by saying that I want to be this, you're assuming that you're not. You're either assuming that you are that state or you're not. There is no in between. There is no trying. You either are or you aren't. And this is where Stoicism comes in. This is where all these disciplined arts comes in, because it helps you to either be or not to be. That is the question. They've been telling us this forever. This is just the science behind it. Quantum wave resonance. So in the quantum realm, resonance involves the behavior of quantum waves, such as those associated with particles like electrons. When these waves interact at specific frequencies, they can amplify each other, leading to significant effects. Energy states. So quantum systems have discrete energy levels. When a quantum system is exposed to an external force at resonant frequency, it can transition between these energy states more efficiently. One more time. Resonance involves the behavior of quantum waves, such as those associated with particles like electrons. When these waves interact at specific frequencies, they can amplify each other. And we talked about particles and waves. So quantum systems have discrete energy levels. We talked about where your energy and vibrations are at because of these waves. And these waves are going out on a quantum level. That's in an unseen field. That's all it is. And you're controlling this with the electromagnetic connection between your brain and your mind and what you're telling your subconscious to do for you. Okay? When a quantum system is exposed to an external force at a resonant frequency, it can transition between these states more efficiently. So quantum tunneling. So resonance can enhance quantum tunneling where particles pass through barriers they normally couldn't. One more time. Resonance, which is what we just talked about, which is the behavior of quantum waves. Resonance can enhance quantum tunneling where particles pass through barriers they normally couldn't. Remember, this is the double slit experiment all the way from 30 minutes ago with Niels Bohr, where when they didn't look at it, they went through like waves. But when they weren't looking, it was just going through the open slit. Quantum tunneling, these particles can go through barriers. So decay and stability. Resonant states can also describe unstable particles that decay over time. These particles exist in a resonant state before decaying into more stable forms. So yes, when you're applying this art of visualization and assumption, this law of attraction, things will decay around you into a more stable state, the state that you've given your mind to create. So obviously there's all kinds of other things that we could talk about, and I don't think I'm going to get into those here. But they did say something interesting, and there's Walter Russell's book, The Secret of Light, which is also very interesting, but that's a read that you're going to have to do on your own. But quantum resonance could enhance the efficiency of quantum processes in the brain, potentially influencing consciousness. And we talked about, you're going to be able to see this. But one more thing. Magnetism. So magnetic fields can influence quantum states and coherence. And consciousness might affect quantum processes through observation and intention, collapsing quantum states and influencing neural activity. Now, the interesting thing about all this, as I close, is that we have believed that all of this is just magic. And in a way, if you don't need to understand it on a physical level like I do, for me, understanding how the whole thing works gives me more power because I need to understand. And some people don't need to understand. You can just go and do it. And that's great. I have more power when I understand how this whole thing works. And all I wanted to do was present you with the information about how the brain works, how it creates an electromagnetic field, how that electromagnetic field is possibly connected to this mind, how the mind processes all this information at almost 5 gigabytes per hour, and how the conscious mind only has to take the thought and plug it into the subconscious mind and let it germinate. Okay? This art of every second, every minute, every hour, you are programming. Okay, so I didn't get into one last thing, which I am going to say here. The mind is actually, so the mind field, this electromagnetic field, is actually shaped in the form of a halo. That halo is called a torus. And if you know anything about the torus field, Nikola Tesla gave us this in 369. If you look at 369, it creates a torus vortex. Mathematics, it's constantly spinning in and out, rotating. And they said this is how the universe is created. All the galaxies and everything is constantly spinning, constantly expanding, constantly creating. This is also in Walter Russell's Secret of Light. So when you get to this halo is created. And if you look at chakras, what's the top chakra called? It's the crown chakra. It's the same thing as the halo, and it's the same thing that we saw on Who We Know's head. I'm not going to say that here, but I'll show you a picture right here. So, this halo of the mind in this electromagnetic field is constantly sending out to these quantum particles and waves, whatever we're plugging into it. And when you can do this, I think that's a great place to end. Give me a like and subscribe. Hit me in the comments. Let me know what you think. Get to the blog. If you're on the podcast side, come over to the YouTube channel to have a conversation with us, and I'll talk to you guys next week. Episode 18. Thanks for joining me, Proper Gentlemen's Club. I'll check you guys later.